In your book, Physics of the Soul, you talk about the near-death experience and how the near-death experience has some resonance with non-local consciousness because people apparently leave their bodies and are able to see things in other rooms that they wouldn't normally be able to see. Talk to us about this in the context of quantum physics.
Yes, this is a good, solid evidence in favor of quantum aspect of non-locality, for example. In experiences that are called autoscopic viewing, a typically a person of cardiac arrest who will be declared dead only to be revived later because of the marvel of modern medicine. Uh, the experience that the person would have during the time he or she was clinically dead was typically that he would feel himself hovering above his physical body. And he or she would see surgery performed on this physical body, even be able to describe such gory details of surgery that it would be truly impossible to rule out that they are describing just from their general knowledge of what might happen in a room where surgery is being performed. In other words, there are just uncanny details specific to that particular operation rather than just generic aspects of heart.
How is it possible to see without eyes?
That's exactly the point. So that's why it's non-locality. So they are not seeing using their own eyes. They are seeing through the eyes of other people, like the surgeon, like the nurses, with whom they have become correlated.
And there are some instances where people feel they're actually very close to the ceiling looking down. In that instance, they would not have access to other people's eyes. So how would you explain that?
Well, it is happening non-locally. So they don't need to, obviously they are not seeing anything with their own eyes. They are clinically dead, remember?
Right.
So they are using other people's eyes. It's non-local seeing. It's non-local seeing, and more than that, this seeing is only in possibility until the possibility is becoming actual event, only after they are revived. Until then, the possibility is remaining in possibility, and only after they are revived, the whole bunch of possibilities in an entire chain of causal events become actualized. This is called delayed choice in quantum physics. They choose actuality from possibility only after they are revived, but that current state comes about because of a series of causal states before, and all of the causal states are actualized in the same fail soup.
In your book, Physics of the Soul, you talk about the Tibetan Book of the Dead and the processes that, what do you call it, the soul goes through. Would you talk to us about this?
It is indeed very much like the soul's journey can be described very much like going through the bardos, what Tibetans call bardos, which means doorways. And it's uncanny resemblance, because indeed Tibetans give us three bardos after death, three bardos in life, and three bardos of death. At death, and then that is called the fourth bardo experience, the immediately after death, and then there is a fifth bardo, and the sixth bardo is when they reincarnate. Now, the fourth bardo is the bardo of clear light, where it is described in the Tibetan Book of the Dead that you see clear light. If you can't see clear light, then you are liberated from this death, birth, reincarnation cycle.
What does clear light have to do with liberation from the material world?
Well, the clear light obviously means light here is consciousness. So you are encountering your true nature, which is consciousness as the ground of being, non-locality of consciousness. And at that moment, because you are liberated from all the conditioning of that birth brings and growing up means, and your identity with the brain and body and all that is gone. So you are free at that point if you can identify it, if you are conscious enough to recognize. That's the idea anyway. And then the next bardo, you have a choice. Either you can be free by seeing the light has become somewhat dim, but even then, if you can see it, then you can be free. Or if you don't see it, then you move on to the sixth bardo, where there is no such choice. You are reincarnated without any going back. This is the idea.
Can we see this light in this life?
Yes, we can see this light in this life, and then that sort of is a cinch, because that shows that this is not imaginations. Because the question can be raised: how do you know about death without having died? But that is ruled out by the fact that yes, we can experience these things even within this life. We just in this life we come back to life, but these are experiences of that people call Samadhi experience. We become part of that non-ordinary state of consciousness in which we are one, in which state such vision that we are entering a consciousness that consists of light often does take place. It also can take place with other kinds of vision, but that is one of the visions that does take place in a experience of samadhi, of that non-ordinary state of consciousness in which we are one.
I think in a near-death experience, when people go so far as to see the light, their lives change. If they come back to life, they are selfless. They are more giving. Also, when someone has the experience of light in this life,
same things happen.
The
same kind of transformation can take place. It's not automatic completely. One still has to manifest what one feels one must manifest. So what happens to the near-death survivors, if they have seen the clear light state and then have returned to their bodies, what happens is that they become inspired to live life differently. Because they have experienced life differently, they can practice easy without effort, things that previously took much more effort. So in that way, they make brain circuits that help them guide in their behavior in the future. And so we see them as transformed beings. The same choice is open to those people who has a samadhi experience. They too have an insight that we are one with others, and we can live ethically, love everybody, and often they do that. And because relatively less effort is involved, they become successful in making such brain circuits of behavior.
How is it that the Tibetan Book of the Dead is possible if it requires an experience of death in order to communicate what has happened?
Well, this is where some confusions occur, because after death, you cannot communicate. Obviously, communication is out. But what is missed is that there is an event of collapse, this change of possibility into actuality at the moment of birth.
You mean reincarnation?
When reincarnation has taken place. And only when reincarnation is taken place, only then we can talk about the sixth bardo that was missed, the fifth bardo that was missed, and the sixth bardo that was entered. So again, you see the Tibetan Book of the Dead, the intuition that these first two bardos has been missed, that intuition, it's an intuition. It's the intuition occurred the moment of birth, which is then latent in the person and later on can be revived with skillful remembering of the birth experience.
So is the intuition of what happened the same as memory?
No, because these are missed opportunities that didn't happen. Mm-hmm. So they are just intuitions. But what is not intuition is what did happen, and those happenings are also described as the sixth bardo experience. The the fourth bardo and the fifth bardo, the clear light and the dim light, they are not experienced, because if they were experienced, then the person is free. You see what is happening?
Right.
So we can only
So if they were
intuit
free,
them.
they wouldn't be able to come back to report it.
There is nobody to come back to report it, or nobody reincarnated, so there is nobody to come back to report it. But how we can intuit about them? Because this memories of intuition that I have missed something is there. That's an intuition. At the moment of the birth, that intuition would come. And the experiences, by the way, are very interesting. The experiences of before one is born, there are experiences, for example, of heaven and hell. This is how the heaven and hell stories become so prominent in not only Tibetan Book of the Dead, but virtually every religion. Where do we get these pictures? These pictures we get because we again remember that as part of that moment of collapse at the birth. Part of that, and they can be said to be memories. They are kind of a memories because in retrospect they actually happen.
What actually happens to people that would cause them to have an experience of hell? For example, I know that when some people take psychedelic drugs, you can have a bad experience, and oftentimes these bad trips are caused because the ego cannot let go. When the ego wants to hold on, that is almost a guarantee of a bad experience.
Yeah, it's certain things that are in the memory. They become part of the possibility wave that the brain goes through. These are I shouldn't say brain. For the near-death experience, it's the brain. For ordinary living person, it's the brain. But for the dead person, there is no brain. Brain is dead. But in the mind, there are also propensities with which become associated some pictures. But they're really what we are experiencing. Also non-locality may enter, but these are actual collapse events where some pictures are generated. Where did these pictures come from? This is what you're asking, basically.
Right. What do you mean by pictures?
Well, hell is a picture.
Right.
Hell is a picture of suffering.
Yes.
So, what survives in a reincarnational event, quantum physical analysis shows that what survives are propensities, are just patterns of habit. The pictures are dead with the brain. The reason that we have pictures, this is very, very interesting. So the pictures must be gotten from non-local correlation with the previous birth. So in other words, we have a non-local window open through which we also experience the content of previous birth. Much of Ian Stevenson's data actually is the data about the content of experience, which are very different than the character of the experience. There are two things that are involved here. One is the content, and this content comes from direct non-local correlation of one birth with all the previous and all the future births also. There's non-local correlation between all of these births, so we are able to pick up snippets of content non-locally from the future and our past.
And this thread that connects various births, you have a word for that, is that?
Yes, it's called Sutratman in Sanskrit. And quantum monad is how I describe it, this thread. So this quantum monadic thread connects all of our previous births together and future births together. And we are non-locally capable of exchanging information, snippets of information, actual content. But there is also something that survives as our deaths that can be called our character, the habit pattern that we pick up, the way we use our mind, the way we use our vital body. Those things also go with us after we die. And this is something that can be called to survive, because non-locality does not need the idea of survival. We are non-locally connected anyway. But what survives and can be picked up in the future, that question can be answered by saying what survives are these propensities. This is what ancient times was called soul. Soul does not have any content, it only has character, which Easterners call karma or samskara.
Right. If consciousness creates matter, if consciousness creates life, then, according to the Tibetan Book of the Dead, the point of life is to merge with the clear light and to get away from matter. Is that correct? Or to at least to not be reborn. Is there some kind of contradiction here? Why would consciousness invent a scenario in which one would want to escape?
Well, that depends on how...
Is that a legitimate question?
It is a very legitimate question. And I must say that this is a fundamental question that goes into the heart of what is the motivation of religion at this particular time.
Tell us what that is.
Well, in the olden days, there was a lot of suffering. Life was suffering. We didn't have escapes like we have today. If the weather was bad, you had to suffer through it. There is no central heating to protect you.
Mm-hmm.
If your mind is going through a difficult time because somebody has died, you have to suffer through it. There is very little distraction, particularly for a person who is not rich. Now there is, even for a fairly not rich person, there are many escapes available. So this absence of escapes made it so bad in terms of suffering. Religions basically identified life as suffering, and escape from this life made sense to people, and therefore to be liberated, even with the idea of reincarnation. Reincarnation mollified the idea a little bit, because one might say, well, okay, this is misery now, but in your next life, good things will happen, so be good, and maybe you can live for good things in the next life. So that mollifies the idea of suffering a little bit. But even then, basically, suffering was bad, and so people could be most inspired by saying there is a way to completely be liberated from this suffering, and so why not just try to liberate yourself from all this now? And achievement of Samadhi and learning what you need to learn in this human birth, if you do that, then you'll be liberated. And that idea is basically good. What we find scientifically is that perhaps such a learning journey is what human birth is about. And when we learn everything, we have nothing more to learn, we are liberated. That makes sense, right? So liberation was giving very high value at that time and in those societies. But now, the situation has changed because we have discovered something else. This is still true. This liberation we still seek, and this liberation is still important. But in addition, what we have discovered is that we also evolve. There is also evolution. This evolution was missed in Buddha's time, in Jesus' time. We are not aware that we also evolve. What does evolution mean? Evolution means that at the same time as we are working towards personal salvation through many lives, we are working hard to purify ourselves and to take us to that liberated moment. In addition to that, whole of humanity is working hard to produce evolution in such a way that we evolve towards greater and greater states of goodness, states of divinity, states of godliness, states of love, as a whole species. The species itself will change into another species where love will be much more easily accessed. This supramental way of being has been predicted by two great Sava. One is Sri Aurobindo of India, the other is Teilhard de Chardin in the West. Will it happen? Well, new science is justifying it. New science says there is now a new theory of evolution. I have written another book which will come out in October called Creative Evolution. I made it much more explicit in that book, but there is a chapter even in God is Not Dead about this evolution. We now can understand evolution as evolution of consciousness in such a way that all the defects of Darwinism is gone, and we get a much more holistic picture of evolution, where there is purposiveness. We evolve with the purpose of becoming more and more loving, more and more into truth, more and more into beauty, more and more into justice. We live not only for our individual salvation in reincarnation, we also live because of this, we are part of the movement of consciousness towards evolution, where we evolve with our fellow members of our species.
Hence, your role as a quantum activist.
Hence my role as quantum activist, exactly, because no longer it is sufficient to work on your own persona and become liberated, but you must work with others, members of your own species, in order to evolve together. And this evolution together is important because that will, of course, improve the environment in which you live. It will help you also, because when you come back and reincarnate, you have found that, the world has improved greatly, and it is easier now to work some of this stuff that I still have to work on.
Right. I think I understand now why you're so passionate about your work.
Thank you. Yes, I am passionate, and it is largely because I have recognized the importance of evolution in spirituality. This idea of evolutionary spirituality is coming to forth in rather strong way. Many other people are aware of this, and I think that it will become a very, very cogent movement in no time.
Last question. Dr. Goswami, how do you see the condition of humanity at this moment in time?
Well, the condition of humanity just at this moment is, of course, a little bit confused. Certainly, materialism has caused havoc with our belief systems that helped us becoming good, following ethics, following values. That is part of it. But the other part of it is very optimistic. Even within that malaise that has set in, there is a significant portion of us. Some people call them cultural creatives. A significant portion of us who is aware of the falsity of materialism, who are aware that the importance of God and godliness that has the possibility of scientific verification, who is aware of this new science coming about, and who are willing to be committed to change themselves and their societies. In other words, these are the people who are hearing the call of evolution. They are open to the movement of consciousness in the sense that they can feel the evolutionary pressure enough to give up their comfortable life and engage in quantum activism. And that is something that I feel very optimistic about. So we are confused. Materialism has produced some malaise. Problems have occurred. Global warming and terrorism, democracy is going away, and capitalism is not working anymore. It's very easy to be pessimistic today. Just look at the stock market, housing market. You can be very pessimistic. But I don't feel pessimistic because I constantly meet people also who are completely aware that this is a temporary phase brought about by misunderstanding that often happens in search of creativity. We make mistakes, and so we go through a phase which people call dark night of the soul in spiritual traditions. And we feel that this dark night is almost over, and we are the ones who are experiencing, who are actually seeing the early light of the new dawn. And then it's not so bad anymore. Actually, to tell you the truth, it looks very good and optimistic from here.
Dr. Goswami, I'd like to thank you very much for your insight, for your wonderful books, and for the movies you've appeared in. I think you've given us great gifts to think about. For that, I thank you, and I think the audience will thank you very much. So thank you for being on the show.
Thank you so much, Pal.
Okay.